Erin. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Elena. It's so good to be here. Excited.
I am super excited because this is, I feel like this topic is always relevant, but I feel like right now where people are revisiting where they are in life, and I feel like we're always continuously doing that and rewriting their stories and trying to find that, that their authentic selves, if you want to call it that, right? Like everybody's trying to kind of find their place in the world. And I feel, after the last couple of years, you see people doing this more and more. And I cannot think of anybody else best to speak to than yourself, who is, that's your thing. So I'm really, really
Yeah.
excited to kind of hear about the things that you're doing with your audience and your clients, and give us some tips and tricks without giving too much sauce to us, too much secret stuff, but just sharing kind of the work that you do. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here and excited to have the conversation with you for sure.
So tell me a little bit more about how did you get into the space of, kind of that personal branding, the storytelling, the finding that, finding who you are as a person, and helping others do the same.
Great question. So, Elena, for many years, I had what I call a dual career. So I did work in business. I was in Silicon Valley at a creative agency, and we represented many of the, big companies in Silicon Valley, and I really enjoyed doing that work. And at the same time, I'm a singer actor, and I was also a professional singer actor. So I was sort of managing both careers for a good 25 years and, climbing up the ladder. By the time, I left my corporate job, I was, vice president marketing at my company. And at the same time, I had done multiple shows and productions. I wrote my own one-woman show. I constantly was doing gigs around the country and, having a lot of fun. And what ended up happening is around the 2016 timeframe, I started realizing that it wasn't enough anymore for me. Like I wanted more out of my career. And I kept saying to myself, I wish I could merge my two careers together. I wish I could take the best of both and do something with it. Now, of course, that made no sense when you kind of look at both those worlds. Like, how would I merge that? And I did finally decide to leave my corporate job, and I started to go on this journey of figuring out, what was next for me. And I know what I told myself at that time was I really want to take all of my passions, the skills, the experience that I have gained over these 25 plus years in both of my careers and look at what I love the most, what I can bring that just charges me up, gets me excited, and really make a difference. I really felt this need to inspire and to make a difference. So I sort of looked at both pieces. And the other thing I also did was also look at the things I don't want to do anymore. And that was big. That was big to say, I've been in the agency world for many, many years, the creative space for many, many years. And I knew right away, as soon as I left my job, the one thing I knew I was not going to do next, I did not want to do an agency job ever again. I was done. I did it. It was boring. And that was huge because if you were to look at my resume back in 2017, who would be looking to hire me? It would be agencies because I had all this experience. So I had to go about and figure that out for myself. And it was by looking at what I love to do, what I don't love to do in both worlds, and kind of create something for myself with the full intent of going back to work, going back and working at a company. But what ended up happening is circumstances led me to realize that I think I need to do this on my own and create something of my own. And how that happened, I was actually working with a business coach. We were kind of looking at and creating where Erin wanted to go next. And she was about helping women, create their own businesses. I was not really at that time interested in that, but I was really interested in utilizing the skills she had and her methodology to kind of figure out my life path, my career path. And what ended up happening as we were doing this work, I started coming up with, what were my desires? And the one thing that bubbled up, and it kind of came out of both my worlds, was if I could help business professionals own their unique voice, they will have no competition. And it was through this just idea that my business coach is like, that's an idea for a business, right? And of course, I'm like, what are you talking about? And she goes, no, think about what you just said. And with all of your training in the performing world and as a singer actor, as a cabaret singer, as a storyteller, I actually utilized a lot of that in my business world. Like when I knew in the business world, when I got up in front of a room or if I got up to do a presentation and I truly showed up as Erin versus there were times in my business career where I would hesitate or I would compare myself to somebody else, or I would think, I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not as great as that person. And I need to sound as smart as them. And I'm not as smart. I used to have that going on in my head. And I know that held me back a lot of times when I would be in front of a room or I would be talking to my boss or talking to a leader or what have you. And then one day when I was in my business world, I started to incorporate my performing in the sense of cabaret singing. Basically, as a cabaret singer, cabaret singing is story and song. And you take the true essence of your voice and you bring that to stage. So there is no fourth wall. It is Erin on that stage. It is me telling my story through song, me being very honest and very vulnerable, and I'm pulling my audience in. And I started to incorporate that essence when I would get in front of a room of business people. And when I did that, Elena, what was interesting, I noticed that I made a big difference. Suddenly, people wanted to know more about me. Suddenly they're like, you should be doing all the presentations. Wow. Or I would suddenly get the deals that I didn't get before. And I realized there was something there. What it was is I brought my authentic, unique self to that room. I was no longer comparing myself to others. And I was truly making a deep connection across that table. And so now back in 2017, 18, when I'm working with this business coach and I had this idea of if I could help business professionals and leaders find and own their unique voice, they will have no competition. That came out of those years of me discovering that for myself. And I knew I could teach business professionals that. And that is really what launched my business. And what ended up happening is it went first down the career transformation road. So I really work with, mid-career business professionals and leaders that are really at that point in their career where they're just not jazzed about it anymore. Or they're just bored or they're uninspired. And they wonder, is this as good as it gets? And what I do is I come in and creating the program that I call Own Your Story, Change Your Life, which is all story driven. And rather than as a business professional going out there and trying to find the answers to what next, it's like, no. Take that moment and do the internal work. Let's look inside you. Let's find the things that you lost sight of. Let's find the parts of you that you're no longer in touch with, or you might have checked out the door as you were climbing up that ladder. And as we get closer to that, which by the way, comes through your story, it's owning those stories you might have lost sight of. You start to get on this road of career transformation unlike anything else because you're defining it through your story, your desire, what excites you, what you value, and what makes you uniquely different. And when you suddenly start owning this, you step into yourself in a way you never have before. And you realize, yeah, you're right. There's nobody like me out there. There might we'll pick marketing people. There's a lot of marketing executives out there, right? Let's say there's 1,000 of them that we're looking at, but there's only one of you. And when you start to look at what makes you, what differentiates you, what excites you, what makes you stand out, when you start to own that and walk into a room, it's suddenly, you're not in a room of 1,000 marketing executives. You're in a room of, you're bringing yourself. And it's such a transformation. And so that's how the business started. And then as time went on, I started to see that, need for stage presence and personal branding presence, which really also ties into you really owning who you are. And especially for leaders, especially rising leaders, a lot of that is not taught. It's not taught. Like they just expect as you're rising up the ladder that you're going to automatically, be comfortable and confident with who you are and be able to walk into a room as a leader and make an impact and, draw your audience in. But if it's not taught, there are a lot of people out there that aren't bringing that in. And there's this sort of invisible wall of no connection, or people just, or they can tell that you're faking it. And as we rise up as leaders, people want you to show up in your authenticness. They want you to be who you are and bring that connection to the room. And you need to learn it because many people don't have that. And I saw this need. And so I took a lot of what I've created in the career package and program and created my stage presence program, which is exactly that inner game piece, which is understanding who we are and becoming very comfortable and confident, and then taking that out into the world, which is what I call your outer game. And it's very, very powerful. And what I love about it, Elena, is to watch these business professionals and these leaders just suddenly just blossom and they just bloom. And it's like, wow. And you can see the impact. Like you can see suddenly the audience is a little bit more comfortable and they're being pulled in by you and they're trusting you and they want what you have. They want that, and it brings me such joy to watch that transformation happen because that's what, you and I, we've been working in the world for quite a while. And we know when you can see that authentic speaker, leader, when he or she's up there, we're pulled in by them and we feel connected to them. And we feel like when this is over, I can't wait to shake their hand or I can't wait to ask them a question. And then we've also been in it where there hasn't been any connection. It feels false or, okay, he or she was good, it was great, but I didn't get much out of it and I don't feel connected to them. But most business leaders want the former, and like I say, when I work with people they know they want it, it is amazing just to watch that transformation happen and watch them just, find such joy in who they are, and I just love that.
Yeah, it's as you're telling me this, I just keep, some things in my own life keep popping up, but then also the people that I work with. And I would imagine it takes also almost courage to be able to do that, to step into that.
Absolutely.
Right? Have you had a lot of clients that are like, okay, I don't know if I can do this, a little bit nervous because I can only imagine like you have to be almost courageous because we're conditioned to be a certain type of way sometimes, right? Depending on the individual. Right. And then it's our innate nature to want to feel like we belong. So last thing we want to do is alienate. I can't even pronounce the word. Wow, I can't pronounce the word today. Make people not like us. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah. But no, that's a really good question because what's interesting about that you're right. There is courage. And I like the fact that you use courage as the word versus fear, because a lot of times we will let fear guides us too much. And what I find, it does take courage. But once that first step is made, they're in because they realize, and that's what's so powerful about the inner game, because we start with that. And when they start, when I have my clients start there, and first they start realizing, where do they want to be when this is over? It's like the first question I ask. And then it's like, what are your strengths, right? But what are those barriers that are getting in the way? And once they're really able to identify them and see them, and they put those on paper and they talk about it, right there, they're already starting to see themselves as an individual and not comparing. And then when we start to step into the inner game, when we really are tapping into the things that really truly make them unique, especially like one of the first exercises is like, tell me the 5 things that excite you. 5 things, and excite you. Like literally, like what are those? And not only what are they, but why Why do they excite you? And then tell me a story about where this shows up. And what's fascinating is when they do that work, it's like there's tons of joy, because what makes you excited is your joy. It's your joy. It's what gets you out of the bed in the morning, right?
Right.
And when they start to see that, and then they're like, oh yeah, because I'm like, those 5 things are unique to you. There's nobody else who would say the same 5 things, have the same why and the same story. So suddenly you're starting to see yourself in this very unique light, and you're finding this joy. And then we start to go into values and understanding the values and tying that to story and picking your own values. A lot of times people have never done that work. They've never done, they know they have really good values. They can name a couple of them, but they've never done the work really to do a deep dive. And when you do a deep dive, which is what we do, and then have you pick the word, which is a fun exercise, but you pick your word. It's not the typical word that everybody is going to, use, because it's an exercise that has you really funnel it down. But when you find those 5 top ones, and then you see the story behind that, it's amazing to watch how people start to just change. And what I mean by that is this level of confidence and comfort and excitement in who they are. They're starting to see themselves as this individual, and kind of they're kind of excited. They're more excited about who they are. And by doing that courageous step they just took, suddenly they realize, oh God, this is the best step I ever took. They're no longer in their fear, because they're doing the work. It's their stories. Nobody telling them, do this, do that, and then you'll have the formula. You're doing this deep work for yourself. And you look so different on paper than anybody else. And that's when you start to realize that whole idea that there's nobody else like you. And the world really wants you to be that person. They don't want to compare you to other people, and they're not expecting you to be, but you said it really well. We have that in our heads, like, oh my God, what will people think about me? If I kind of
about the real me.
about the real me. And what's so amazing, and I will tell you honestly, every single one of my clients, the people in their world just were so attracted to them. Because they were starting to see more of them, and like, oh my God, I really just love you. And it inspired them. It inspired their loved ones, their friends, to say, what did you do different? What are you doing? Like, it's because they're getting really comfortable and confident in who they are. And once you do, and then we take that on the outside, like the outer game piece, which is when you walk in the room, are you bringing that every single time and working on that part, which is always fun. But I wouldn't start there. You got to start with that inner game piece, because, seeing that unique self, and then, owning that and becoming really comfortable and confident every time you walk in a door, every time that camera turns on, every time you might get on a huge stage. Everybody's different, right? That's who the audience gets to see. And when we show up in that authentic way and bring that voice to the room, to the stage, automatically you're pulling people in to you, because that's what they want. They really do. And here's the thing. People can see right through it when we're faking it.
Oh yeah, 1000%.
Yeah, you and I know it. We've seen it, right? And they know it. And the thing is, it's like, especially as we as leaders, rising leaders, and even business professionals that are just trying to figure out what next for them, when you become so confident in who you are, and it's genuine confidence, it's not fake,
right?
It makes such a difference. It makes a difference in the people around you, and even just how you're showing up. And it's much more comfortable. And I think it's really important as leaders today that we are bringing that level of being authentic to the room, to the stage every time. And I think you see that missing a lot. And people need to be inspired. Teams need to be inspired. by leaders.
Mm.
Teams also know when leaders are not really being authentic, and they
Yeah.
know when it's like, and you know what happens? That happens. It's like it's a level of, trust kind of goes out the window. A level of like, well, I don't really connect with him. I don't believe her. They don't say these things out loud. It's a
Right.
feeling.
It's a feeling.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why this level of stage presence and being comfortable and confident in who we are as individuals, I think can make such a difference in the workplace, really in the world in so many respects.
As you're saying, as you're talking about it, and something you said earlier, which kind of stuck, and it says, you define it. So, and what's interesting is that as you begin to define it, my gut feeling is that, and I'm curious, what actually happens, but I see how once you start to define yourself in different terms, right? And who you truly are, I wonder how often do people actually end up realizing they're not doing what they should be doing?
That's such a great question. Yes, that's
Right?
a
Like, because they
very good
can't be
question.
like, they actually, don't, like the true selves is not, does that happen?
It's interesting. I would tell you, especially from a career transformation side of things, majority of my clients, when they first come to me, believe that it's the company they're working for or the job they are in. I got to get out of here. Got to get out of here, kind of thing. You hear that a lot, right? And of course, I always say to people, okay, before you go find another job, you need to do this work. Because what will happen is if you just go find another job, in more than likely, you're going to recreate the wheel. I mean, it's going to be the same merry-go-round that you were just on. A year from now, you're going to be back at that same place, So it's like doing this work really important. And that's why they do the work. And it's, and it doesn't take very long. It's so powerful, but it doesn't take very long. And what's fascinating is I can tell you I've had multiple times when the aha very pretty early on, it's not the company, it's me. I haven't been showing up fully, or I have just stayed at this job out of fear, and not looked to see what other opportunities there are, even in the company I'm working at. Or, and I have had people say, I just fell into this business. I left college. I got hired by this amazing company. 20 years later, I'm still here, went up the ladder and realized after doing this work that they've gained so much experience and so many transferable skills, but realized the industry no longer excites me. But I'm grateful to this company versus when they come to me, it's, I hate my company. I don't like what they stand for. I don't like their values, that kind of thing. And then they realize when they start to peel it away, it's like, no, I just outgrew this. I outgrew this company, or I thought medical devices was my thing, but realized I'm bored now. But I'm so grateful for the experience. But I realized that my real joy, my jam is elsewhere.
Yeah.
But they couldn't get that kind of clarity. And it's interesting. The one person I'm thinking about right now, we're talking about, they were just ready to go to another healthcare company. That I'm just going to get another healthcare company. And then we started working together. And it was like, no, it had nothing to do with your company. It had the fact that you hit your limit. You're kind of done with healthcare. You have joy over here, But so grateful for all the experience and everything you gained here. And now I'm taking this whole thing and I'm going to start changing industries. They didn't have the clarity of that change in industry because to them, they were stuck. Well, I'm a medical device person. I think healthcare is so great. That was what they would say. They realized they're kind of done with healthcare, but they didn't have that kind of clarity. They just thought it was the company's fault, And that's why that deep work is really important because it allows you, I always say it allows you to be in the driver's seat. It
Yeah.
really does. It allows you to like take a step back and take yourself on a trip that is just for yourself to go and figure out, what do you desire? What do you want next?
Mhm.
How do you want to show up, in that room? What's
Mhm.
holding you back? Taking that little vacation away from the go, 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 and just giving yourself the gift of, I'm going to spend these next 8-10 weeks on myself and figure
Mhm.
out what next. Because most people, especially, mid-career business professionals, their goal at this point is, I don't want to go get stuck. I want to make a difference. I want
Mhm.
to do something where I feel like I'm making great impact. And they don't, in their heart of hearts, they don't want to just go and find another job, but fear gets in the way where they feel they have to just
Mhm.
go find another job or stay at this company because they have really great benefits. They pay me really well. I'm
Mhm.
bored as
Yeah.
crazy bored, right? But it's safe,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like, okay, those are all, and I've heard them all. I felt them all. I can honestly tell you, like all those, I remember feeling that way. And it's like, yes. So when you feel like that, this is a great time. Take a step back and give yourself a gift to yourself.
Mhm.
Invest in, hey, what do I really want?
Mhm.
And figure it out for yourself. Because it's
Mhm.
amazing what does come to fruition by just doing that little gift.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think I'm just keep thinking about so many people that I meet, and it's either they are feeling like there's nothing unique or special about them, and I loved your point earlier is that people do attract you, so the right kind of people, and not, I don't know if the right kind of people is the word, but your audience will attract you, and I think there's a misconception in the world that everybody has to like us and that's why we have to be this certain way. But the reality is not everybody's gonna like you, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Like that's
Exactly.
you can't please everybody. Everybody has
Yes.
their own preferences. So I think just this is like a win-win, right? Like
Yes.
you're not losing anything from this, you're gaining something from this.
Yeah.
And I work with a lot of software developers, very introverted group of people. For many of them,
Mhm.
don't really feel like they don't believe they need this kind of thing because like, I don't really want to be in leadership or management position. But it sounds like it's beyond that. It's more about, it's not necessarily
Absolutely.
just about speaking on stage
Right.
or in leadership meetings. It's more about coming into yourself and
Right.
and showing up even on one-on-one. It's just
Right.
and more in from what it sounds like to me, it's the most impactful part here is that internal work.
Yeah.
That's the most like, and I feel everybody needs that. Like frankly speaking, we all could use that.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah. It's a very powerful step. And it's interesting. You hit the nail on the head. Especially when we talk about presence, your personal presence, your personal brand, everybody has one. And everybody in the business world really needs to own theirs. Even the software developers who are introverted, they might be sitting back here and they may choose, I want to be an individual contributor in my career. I don't want to be in leadership. That's fine. Actually, praise to them, honestly. But you know what? Even as an individual contributor, you are a leader.
mm-hmm,
And everybody can step into their leadership. And part of that is your presence. So even as an introvert, software developer, it's like, how are you showing up and really bringing your unique self and realizing that you really are special and unique. And when you're feeling comfortable and confident in that, I mean, I've had many clients that are introverts,
mm-hmm,
many. And it is amazing how it does that piece when they own that and understand it and see that and understand how that aligns with, their values and what they bring uniquely to the marketplace.
mm-hmm.
They they step up in a very different way. They're not shy about who they are. And
Mm-hmm.
we're not telling them that to be up and down and jumping. That's not what we're
Right.
talking about. It's like, that means when you do walk in every room and that you hit it, like, and when I teach the stage presence, I'm like, people, this is every room you walk into, even when you walk into your one-on-one with your boss.
Mm-hmm.
are you bringing your unique presence to that room? Are you owning who you are? That's all of your strengths, all your skills, everything that you uniquely bring. Are you owning that and being proud of it and seeing yourself not as another software developer, but who you are? And oh, by the way, I'm a software developer. You know, and yeah, it's a very powerful thing. I believe, you know, all business professionals, and probably anybody really, but you know, we're talking about that audience, you know, it's a powerful step to help them feel very comfortable, confident about their career, what they choose with their career, and how they show up in their career, whether they are leading the place or they're just an individual contributor trying to make a difference.
Yeah.
Everybody's powerful, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, it's and I wish, you know, again, I think it's just about courage. It's about because oftentimes I would imagine also as you discover this, and depending on where you are in your life, but you might look back and say, why have I not done this earlier? And have I been living a lie? Right? And that can be a little bit depressing, exciting, but you can also be like, wait a minute. So I personal opinion, I believe that some people are just afraid to what they might find out.
Right.
You know?
Yes. And I always tell people that you come into this at the right time. Like there is no perfect time. Many people are not even ready for it because in the 20s and 30s, we're still trying to figure ourselves out. Though I will say I have quite a few clients in their 30s, but it is interesting. I said, you come to it at the right time. The past is perfect. At what brought you here, you're here at the right time. And the courage is listening to that voice inside that's saying, I know I want more. I just don't know how to get it. You know, and saying, okay, I know this is the right next step. I'm scared to death, have no idea where we're going. What if I don't like myself when it's over? Which, by the way, never happens. It's the complete opposite. But, you know, I know the scripts that go on in people's heads. And I did have one client who I worked with. He's a senior VP at a company. And he did the whole stage presence program with me. And he got so much out of it that as we were getting close to the end, he said, can you work with he had 3 rising leaders on his team that were on the track to becoming VPs, you know? And he says, would you be able to work with the 3 of them together? I want them to do this together and do this with them. I'm like, absolutely. And so we set that up. 3 wonderful, wonderful gentlemen. But at first they were all like, okay, yeah, this sounds really great. Like, what are we doing? You know? But what I loved about my client, he had told the 3 of them when we had our first meeting, he says, you know, you guys are going to be amazed by what's going to happen in these next, 8, 10 sessions. But he says, I wish I was given this 10 years ago. And he says, oh, the things I could have done. And he says, I want to gift this to you, to his team, because I should have, and I wish I had this 10 years ago when I was on the leadership track, rather than as a senior VP next to the C-suite. That's when he's learning it, right? But so he gifted it to them. And I have to tell you, all 3 of them, I mean, they came in, okay, sounds good. Engineers, designers, stuff. And I'm telling you, Elena, total success stories, all 3 of them. And they took to it. They did everything. Like they didn't hesitate. They're like, okay, I've never done anything like this, but wow. And even at their end, they're like, this was like the most incredible thing I've ever done. And they're like, I thought it was just going to be, stage presence and some rote program where, do step A, step B, whatever. And they're like, it's not that at all. And it's like, and they all said the gold was in the inner game. Yeah. The gold was in the inner game. And it is, because it really helped them to see themselves as that unique leader, that individual leader who they are, and embrace their leadership. Not something someone told them, this is how you have to lead. This is how you have to show up. No. They got to embrace their leadership. and what a difference they made with their teams because they started showing up differently.
Mm.
They're much more connected to their team. They were much more authentic, much more real. They weren't afraid to be who they were. And they were all three completely different personalities. And it was just wonderful to watch that transformation happen with them, you know, and honestly, them stepping into their leadership the way they did. It was just wonderful to watch. I was just so proud of them because they were afraid at first, but again, it was that courageous step they took. Okay, we'll do this. And they were all in. They were all in. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think most often when people experience that inner work, even the skeptics of it, they find out very quickly that it's not what they imagine it is. You know,
exactly. Yes. Yeah.
It's rarely that. It's usually, you know, people get very surprised by how effective these kind of things are.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And very powerful. And to me, I love it just because I just love teaching it. I mean, and watching that it works, and it works so easily because again, it's you doing the work.
Right.
It's you. It's your story. It's your personality. It's you. And that makes it fun for the person, but also it's easier for them to embrace because no one's telling them you need to show up as. It's like, no. That's all. There's none of that there, you know. And again, this is not really ever taught. We're just expected as we get into our career and we start climbing up the ladder. It's just expected that you should just know
right
how to be this way and how to show up as a leader and bring your unique leadership to the table or bring yourself to the room. And that's not necessarily true at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's I'm always continuously amazed by in organizations how it is very much expected that you should just know these things, and we don't know what we don't know, right?
Right.
And we on top of that we get so busy and so, you know, just on the doing that, you know, unless there's resources and people like yourself that can kind of guide us in that direction, it's very easy to just keep doing what you're doing and not realizing how much more that you can be. Not necessarily do, but just be. You know?
Yeah. And you probably hear it often, and we still do, you know, and I remember even when I started working, you know, in corporate America, because I first started, you know, at Silicon Valley, I was at Hewlett Packard for years and then, you know, moved into the agency world. But, you know, you constantly would hear fake it till you make it.
And
people still use that today. And and what happens is fake it till you make it, it causes anxiety in people. It causes, oh, I got to fake it. Okay. I got to steel my nerves or whatever it means for somebody. And when you do the inner work and you do the inner game stuff, that starts to disappear. That even that phrase disappears from your vocabulary because you're no longer faking it until you make it. You're making it because you being yourself. So and I'm like, God, that's just one of those things I really wished back in my 20s and 30s I would have had this, you know, knowledge, you know, and I didn't. I mean, I mean, this program, both of these programs are birthed out of my own experience. So I understand business professionals and leaders because I was them. I've been there. I've seen it. I know what it's like to walk into a room and be afraid to speak because, you know, well, like I said earlier, like I'm not smart enough. I don't sound as smart as all those people. I don't have an MBA. I mean, all those little scripts going on in my head, like I know what it's like to feel that way, to hear that inner dialogue going in our heads, and the fake it till you make it. I know exactly. I'm like, no, we got to break that chain, you know?
No, absolutely. So before I ask you my last question, where can people follow your content, maybe get in touch with you? Where do you usually hang out at?
I usually am on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn And then also I'm on Instagram. My company is Inspiration Squared. So it's inspiration and SQRD.com is my website, and also on Instagram. I'm there as well under my business name. Yes, and I love to have conversations with people. So if you're listening to this and you're interested, if you go to my website, there you can sign up for, a 30-minute conversation with me. I love meeting people. I love talking to people and really just chatting about this really resonates, like even having a conversation about what's getting in your way right now of really expressing and bringing yourself to the stage, to the room. Let's have a conversation. I would love it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay. So I'll make sure to include all of that in the show notes for those that are listening and maybe not able to take note of it right now. Last question I have for you is, what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
I wish they would ask, the first thing that comes to mind is, what excites me about my life and my career? What excites me? Ask yourself that question. And then, how is that showing up today? You'd be amazed the information you will find just in that question. So I tell people, figure out what those 5 things are. And then take a step back, look at it again and say, how is that showing up today? And you have a lot of information in that, because if you notice that 3 of the 5 are missing, this is why you're uninspired, you're not excited, you're bored. Just that little thing can really, and ask yourself that often, especially in those moments when you're feeling, not inspired. What's missing? And the first place to start is like, what excites me? What brings me joy? And see how is it showing up.
It's a beautiful question.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for coming on the show and having a chat. It was really, really interesting and insightful. And I think people are listening, I had a lot of moments as you were talking. I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, so I've had a lot of my own kind of self-reflections as you were speaking. I'm sure people felt the same that are listening to or watching this as well. So thank you.
Thank you. This is wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.